One of the defining challenges you face in the coming months is how to deliver on your promise to Americans on issues like immigration reform, gun control, voting rights, climate change. All of those right now are facing stiff, united opposition from Republicans on Capitol Hill. How far are you willing to go to achieve those promises that you made to the American people?
Well, I'm good. Look, when I took office, I decided that it was a fairly basic, simple proposition, and that is I got elected to solve problems. And the most urgent problem facing the American people, I stated from the outset, was COVID-19 and the economic dislocation for millions and millions of Americans. And so that's why I put all my focus in the beginning. There are a lot of problems, but all my focus on dealing with those particular problems. And the other problems we're talking about, from immigration to guns and the other things you mentioned, are long-term problems. They've been around a long time. And what we're going to be able to do, God willing, is now begin one at a time to focus on those as well. And whether it's immigration or guns or a number of other problems that face the country. But the fundamental problem is getting people some peace of mind so they can go to bed at night and not stare at the ceiling wondering whether they lost their health insurance, whether they're going to lose a family member, whether they're going to be in a position where they're going to lose their home because they can't pay their mortgage, or the millions of people are going to get thrown out of their homes because of the inability to pay their rent. So we're going to move on these one at a time, try to do as many simultaneously as we can, but that's the reason why I focused as I have. And here's the deal. I think my Republican colleagues are going to have to determine whether or not we want to work together, or they'll decide that the way in which they want to proceed is to just decide to divide the country, continue the politics of division. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to move forward and take these things as they come.
And just to follow up, Mr. President, can your presidency be a success if you can't make progress on those four challenges: climate change, immigration reform, gun control, voting rights?
Well, I plan on making progress on all of them, but that's going to be for the American people to decide. I think, I doubt whether, maybe you did, maybe others did. I thought, many of you thought there was no possibility of my getting the plan I got passed without any Republican votes. Pretty big deal. Got passed. Growing the economy. People's lives are changing. So let's see what happens. All I know, I've been hired to solve problems. Not create division.
Now, I'd love to know what you think of any of his answers, beginning with his first one. He's at his best at that moment. He's, got them not fatigued. He's only been standing there for 5 minutes. It goes downhill. But that was the first filibuster question. Here's the second one with Yamiche from PBS, cut number 5.
My follow-up question is, one, if you could talk a little bit about which families, why they're being allowed to stay, what the families that are being allowed to stay, why they're being allowed to stay. In addition to that, when it comes to the filibuster, which is what Zeke was asking about, there's immigration is a big issue, of course, when it related to the filibuster, but there's also Republicans who are passing bill after bill trying to restrict voting rights. Chuck Schumer is calling it an existential threat to democracy. Why not back a filibuster rule that at least gets around issues including voting rights or immigration? Jim Clyburn, someone, of course, who you know very well, has backed the idea of a filibuster rule when it comes to civil rights and voting rights.
Well, a second. Look, Yamiche works for you. She's a PBS employee. I like her. I've worked with her for many years. When I go back in the studio on Meet the Press, I'm not doing Meet the Press until we're back in the studio, but when I do that, I hope Yamiche is there. But Yamiche asked a very left-wing question and phrased it as a left-wing question. Indeed, the president only called on journalists who are, with the Sungmin Kim and Zeke, are pretty straight and narrow. Kristen Welker, straight and narrow. The rest of them are pretty left of center. Yamiche is the hardest left of center, but that's just framed as a left-wing question. I love your phone calls, by the way. Open up the lines, 1-800-520-1234. So Yamiche has asked a question on the filibuster. Here's the answer. Cut number 5. Continue.
I'm going to deal with all of those problems. The question is the priorities as they come and land on my plate. Let's go to the first question you asked, the first of the second questions you asked. And that is, what about dealing with families? Why are not some not going back? Because Mexico is refusing to take them back. They're saying they won't take them back, not all of them. We're in negotiations with the president of Mexico. I think we're going to see that change. They should all be going back, all be going back. The only people we're not going to let sitting there on the other side of the Rio Grande by themselves with no help are children. And what we're doing there, and it's an important point to understand. I know you understand it. I don't mean to say it that way. Important point to focus on. The vast majority of people under the age of 18 come to the United States come with a telephone number on a wristband or come with a telephone number in their pocket in the United States. A mother, a father, a close relative, a grandmama or grandpa. What was happening before is it's taking literally weeks and weeks and maybe even months before anybody pick up the phone and call to see if there really was someone there.
Stop.
Well,
That's just a
we've
blatant
set up a
lie.
system
It's
now.
not true. It's just not true. The vast majority of children do not arrive with a phone number of someone to call. It's simply just not true. If it is true, open up the reception centers and show it to us. It is an urban myth. It is not true. Third question on the filibuster comes from our friend Sungmin Kim of the Washington Post, cut number 6.
To follow up on the filibuster, so do you believe it should take 60 votes to end a filibuster on legislation or 51?
If we could end it with 51, we would have no problem. You're going to have to, the existing rule, it's going to be hard to get a parliamentary ruling that allows 50 votes to end the filibuster, the existence of a filibuster. It's not my expertise in what the parliamentary rules and how to get there.
Now, he's reading.
Our preoccupation with the filibuster is totally legitimate, but in the meantime, we got a lot we can do while we're talking about what we're doing.
He's often looking down and reading. Last question on the filibuster from Caitlin Collins, cut 11.
For you, but first, I'd like to follow up on a question from Yamish, and that's on the filibuster.
That counts as a question, but go ahead.
Okay, I'll make it quick. It's a quick question. Regarding the filibuster, at John Lewis's funeral, President Barack Obama said he believed the filibuster was a relic of the Jim Crow era. Do you agree?
Check, stop.
Yes.
CNN does fact checks. I don't care if President Obama said that at John Lewis's funeral. I don't care if he says it on the steps of his house. I don't care if he walks out in the middle of Pennsylvania Avenue and says it's not true. It's false. It's a lie. So when CNN does that, they're using President Obama's lie to cover their own lie, and they're not fact-checking themselves. 4 questions about the filibuster, because the media is left-wing and wants to change the filibuster, which they did not complain about during the years that Chuck Schumer used the filibuster to frustrate Donald Trump for 4 years. And Republicans don't claim about it because it is an essential nature of the Senate to be a bipartisan body and to slow things down. But we had 4 questions on the filibuster. Bob in Atlanta, what do you think, Bob?
Well, Hugh, I love listening to you, but I like to give you a hard time, too. So I'm going to cross-examine you. I'd like a yes or no answer. Do you think President Biden is that bright? I don't. I don't think he's that bright at all. What is your answer? Can you do a yes or no for me?
Yes or no. I think sometimes he's very bright, but often he exhibits the same sort of slowness that my father, when he was 78, exhibits. How's that?
Well, I'm not talking about that kind of dementia.
Not dementia. I mean, he takes a while to come up with the answer. I think he's bright. He's a learned guy. He's been around. But I think when you get to be 78, it takes a while for the gears to engage. I know it from my dad. I'm sure in 20 years I'll be the same way. It's called the body. It's called the human body slows down. Reagan slowed down. Everybody slows down. I don't think he's got dementia. I just think he's slow. Slow Joe Biden. I called him that before Donald Trump invented his first nickname. Stay tuned, America.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
What is the reality for you and your deputies when it comes to the last 58 days in America? Have things changed for you when it comes to illegal migration in your county, Sheriff?
Oh, absolutely. And it's been a disastrous change. It is not a change that we welcomed or are enjoying, that's for sure. You know, immediately overnight, we started having, the last 2 months we've had 40-plus pursuits where they end in a bailout, which means that they run from us, they stop, everybody bails out of the vehicle into the desert. Typically, they'll leave somebody behind. Like we had one where 12 people bailed out of the car and they left a 16-year-old Guatemalan girl behind because they know that we're going to have to deal with this unaccompanied minor while all of them go free into this country. Last Wednesday alone, we had 49 apprehensions in one day. It's not uncommon for us to go out and have 20 apprehensions. And mind you, I'm 60 miles off the border. That's how far they're infiltrating into our country. Camouflage clothes. They don't want to be caught. And here's what I know I'm kind of running on, and I'll give you a second.
No. We need to know. Our listeners, our viewers need to know. So you tell us what's changed.
You know, and what I keep telling people, this isn't about immigration anymore. This is about human trafficking and drug trafficking into this country. And if you care about human beings, it shouldn't matter what party you are. If you care about protecting those people, then you should absolutely care about border security, because the cartel is using these people to gain money. They're raping the women. They're using the children as pawns, which is clear as day right now, and they extort the men.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
I just got an email about someone who says they have to take mandated racial diversity seminar training or whatever it is. And all I have to say is that there is a piece of art, and I don't use that word lightly, that is so perfect, so funny, so politically incorrect, that hits this perfectly. It's from the legendary show The Office. Now, The Office started as an unbelievably politically incorrect show, and then it got into this kind of like quasi-woke thing later on. But the episode Diversity Day with Steve Carell, it's so politically incorrect, especially in today's time. I'm just going to tell you something right now. If I dared repeat some of the lines here, it wouldn't even be an advertiser boycott. I'd be an advertiser invasion. One of my favorite lines is Steve Carell looks into actually, this might be the pilot episode. You see, I'm not an expert in a lot of things, but I am an expert in the central canon of the first season of The Office, because it all went downhill from there. I watched the later. The first season of The Office is so well written, as if they don't care about, they just said, we are going to swing for the fences, bottom of the ninth, we want this show to catch on, that they just took huge risks. Steve Carell famously said, as Abraham Lincoln said, if you are a racist, I will attack you from the north. I highly encourage you to check it out, because we need to laugh about this stuff a little bit, because people are emailing me, Charlie, what do I do about this diversity seminar? If you think you have it bad, check out Michael Scott, who had to take the diversity class seminar.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
It is not normal, and my best argument is
a little bit of rain out here in California, America, but not enough to slow down the Friday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Good morning to you. I want to remind you, you can be watching on YouTube. I want to remind you can be watching on Facebook. I want to remind you I have two podcasts. One is called The Interview with Hugh Hewitt. Just Google that or go to Spotify or go to Apple iTunes and look for the interview with Hugh Hewitt. We put up 2 or 3 35 to 60-minute interviews with one person, stuff you learn from, stuff you can do a workout from. And then every day we do the rundown of the news of the day. Today, that rundown is simply the president's press conference, 1-800-520-1234. There were many questions on the filibuster and immigration. Very few questions on anything else. Here's one question on Afghanistan from Ken Vogel of the New York Times, cut number 8.
I wanted to ask you about Afghanistan. You face a May 1st deadline for the withdrawal of U.S. troops from that country. As a candidate in foreign affairs, you wrote that it is past time to end these forever wars. Can you commit to the American people that by May 2nd, the U.S. will no longer have forces in Afghanistan?
The answer is that it's going to be hard to meet the May 1 deadline. Just in terms of tactical reasons, it's hard to get those troops out. So what we've been doing, what I've been doing, and what Secretary Blinken has been doing, we've been meeting with our allies, those other nations that have NATO allies who have troops in Afghanistan as well. And if we leave, we're going to do so in a safe and orderly way. We're in consultation, I say, with our allies and partners. And
reading.
How to proceed.
All right. Just so you know.
And Secretary
He's
Blinken
reading.
is meeting.
That's okay. Stop it. It's just, I've never seen it before. A lot of people remarked, I've been watching presidential press conferences since Ford in 1976. I've never seen a president with a binder read from it before. He's reading. It's really quite remarkable. Alan in Florida. What do you think, Alan?
Well, hello, Hugh. Good morning. Yeah, I listened to the whole thing, watched the whole thing, and rather than speak with candor and answer the question, I describe it as staged word salad. But two things are very clear to me. Yeah, two things are very clear to me, Hugh. Number one, they asked him about what was he going to do with the Mexicans that were being held in America now, and he said that he was negotiating with the Mexican government to return their own citizens. So obviously the border's open.
No, I want to correct you on one thing, Alan. He talked about many of the people who are in the United States are not Mexican. They're Guatemalans, they're Hondurans, they're El Salvadorians, there are other people from further south, Nicaraguans. And when he talked about immigrants, he didn't say Mexican, because it's not just Mexicans, and the Mexican government doesn't have to take back non-Mexican citizens. Yes, you can take Mexican citizens back immediately.
Right, but he did say specifically he spoke with the Mexican government to take the citizens back.
Yeah, but he actually said he's negotiating with the Mexican government to take back some of those people, but he's not going to send back children, and most of those people are not Mexican. So I don't want to mischaracterize him. I just was wondering what you thought about his delivery.
Well, his delivery was, no candor, staged word salad. It was, and obviously the filibuster's on the table. I mean, they want to dismantle the filibuster, and I think Joe's manipulators behind the scene will get him to sign whatever needs to be signed so that he can
What do you think of the media asking 4 questions about the filibuster? They didn't ask one question about the filibuster during the Trump years when the filibuster was used against Trump. Not one.
No, you're right. Well, because, again, they're setting up the American public, CNN, all the media outlets will go full court press, convince the Americans that the filibuster is bad, that the filibuster is something that is antiquated, just like Barack Obama said, and they're going to try to shove it out the door, push their agenda, and then in the event that the pendulum swings back the other way and Republicans take control of the House and Senate in 2022, there'll be no filibuster.
You know what? The good news is Republicans will win the House in 2022. That's the good news. But the bad news is the media is lockstep. I mean, it's just an extension of the Democratic Party. Peter Ducey was there yesterday from Fox. He didn't get called on. I'm just kind of astonished that nobody notices. And that's, by the way, why ratings are crashing for television. Everybody knows it's not true. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Food for the Poor.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
It is not normal, and my best argument is my antipathy to the veil that many Muslim women wear. It dehumanizes them. So why doesn't this mask dehumanize you? There used to be a saying about someone who did something shameful. This guy can't show his face around town anymore. Show your face. That's you. It may be fair, it may be unfair. That is you. You're hiding your face for a year for no good reason? I see these ads for masks. Do you know, we all fantasize, and I'm not speaking about the erotic, I'm speaking about fantasizing other things. So we all fantasize something that would just change a lot. I have one. Here's a fantasy. That there were as many ads telling people not to wear masks outside as there were telling them to wear it outside. But no, I'll bet you no billboard company would put it up. Right? I mean, what if we just quoted from scientific literature, masks outdoors are generally useless?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Folks, I'm talking to Ann McElhenney and Phelim McAleer. You have a film that you are on the verge of making. It's called My Son Hunter, and it's about Hunter Biden.
When you think about it, this should be the opening skit on every Saturday Night Live.
I was just going to say, precisely, yes.
I mean, and you know, I don't like making fun of alcoholics being Irish, you know, but the politics is so funny. I mean, this guy, as Ann said, you know, thrown out of the Navy, alcoholic, drug addict,
gets a stripper pregnant.
Who hasn't? He, you know, he goes to rehab, meets a homeless woman on the way into rehab called Bicycles, because she's always got a bicycle, goes off and lives with her for 3 months. This is by his own admission. But the joke, the real joke here is, who did Burisma? They did an international executive search, and who did they decide was the best person for their
on
board?
the planet Earth, after a deep dive, you know, in really checking out all the people available and doing all background checks, this is the one guy you want on your energy board.
He's a crack addict. He's filmed himself in pornographic acts and put it on the web. Jimmy Carter had a brother named Billy who was constantly getting Jimmy Carter in trouble. I remember this as a kid and thinking how embarrassing it would be to have somebody close to you in the family who's saying things and doing things. This is that times a billion. He's compromising. Imagine if Billy Carter had been talking to the Soviets. Imagine if Billy Carter had been doing back deals with the Soviets.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
I'm a teacher in an elementary school, and a lot of our professional development is on racism because our school is very diverse in that population. And one of the professional development we had was on diverse books and the lack of diverse books. Mm-hmm. So basically the statistics they gave us was that, this is from 2018, that 50% of all children's books that are published are based on characters who are white. So 50% white, 27% are animals or other, you know, things besides people. 10% is based on blacks, 7% on Asian Pacific or Asian people, 5% on Latinos, and then 1% on American Indians. and how this is an example of systemic racism, and it's very hard to find diverse books.
My first thought, Mary, is who sat around and added them all up like that? I mean, that's just amazing to me.
Right?
That's stunning to me. The good book is a good book. A good character is a good.
Welcome back, America. The rundown continues of all the questions that were asked of President Biden yesterday. The media, AP, PBS, the Washington Post, ABC, New York Times, NBC, CBS, CNN, Bloomberg, all focused on immigration and the filibuster, with the exception of a question on Afghanistan and one on North Korea and one on China infrastructure. So, focusing on the filibuster and focusing on voting rights and focusing on immigration are left-wing agenda items, and the media is left-wing. I know Joe Biden is not on the top of his game. He's 78 years old. And so that's not exactly a headline. He's slow, he's reading, he can lose the thread, just like any other 78-year-old out there. He doesn't have dementia, he's just slow and 78. Yeah, by the way, I think he's fine being president. I think Ron Klain is a good advisor. Joe Biden is a good advisor. I think he's got a fine cabinet. There's no constitutional crisis. But I do think the media's left-wingedness is pretty doggone pronounced, and it drives the country deeper into division because they don't see anyone asking what they want to know about. When are you going to open the school down the block? When are you going to open the schools? You promised to open the schools. My school is closed. That doesn't get asked. Here's another filibuster. Think of all the parents who are watching, wondering, what am I going to learn about school? And Caitlin Collins of CNN stands up. I mean, this is long. It's been asked 4 or 5 times. Cut number 11.
For you, but first, I'd like to follow up on a question from Yamish, and that's on the filibuster.
That counts as a question, but go ahead.
Okay, I'll make it quick. It's a quick question. Regarding the filibuster, at John Lewis's funeral, President Barack Obama said he believed the filibuster was a relic of the Jim Crow era. Do you agree?
Yes.
If not, why not abolish it if it's a relic of the Jim Crow era?
Successful electoral politics is the art of the
Up for a second. 2 things to note. Caitlin was reading her question. Did you notice that? I want to go back to that and play it for you because she says, if not. The president says yes. Is it a relic? She quotes, she hides her leftism behind Barack Obama's unfair and ahistorical attack on the filibuster as being a relic of Jim Crow. Jim Crow era begins after the 14th Amendment passes. The filibuster dates to 1806. It has been used successfully by segregationists in the South to slow down and water down civil rights legislation until it was ultimately broken in 1964. It was last modified and reaffirmed by the Senate in the 70s, which is post-Jim Crow. All right, so it's not a relic of the Jim Crow era. It is most recently modified in the 1970s. So it is not a relic of the Jim Crow era. It was used in the Jim Crow era. But Barack Obama never told you the truth. And Caitlin Collins here, what I love about this is it proves it's all performance art. She's not listening to his answer. Play it again, cut number 11.
That he believed the filibuster was a relic of the Jim Crow era. Do you agree?
Yes.
If not, why not abolish it? If
Okay, stop. Do you agree? Yes. If not, why not abolish it? What he said yes. Oh, so the answer should be, oh, okay. Then, if you agree, why not? But she's just reading. Okay, play the rest of it.
Era.
Successful electoral politics is the art of the possible. Let's figure out how we can get this done and move in the direction of significantly changing the abuse of even the filibuster rule first. It's been abused from the time it came into being by an extreme way in the last 20 years. Let's deal with the abuse first.
It sounds like you're moving closer to eliminating the filibuster. Is that correct?
Stop. He said nothing of the sort. He said nothing of the sort. Let's deal with the abuse first. It might have come up. The better question right then would be, the real question, well, Mr. President, your party used the filibuster repeatedly against Donald Trump. Why is it bad for the Republicans to use it, but the Democrats? You see, that would be a fair question. That would be an interesting question. That would be the question that's on half the country's mind, maybe even 3/4 of the country's mind. Instead, Caitlin, here's something that he doesn't. It sounds like you're. Go on, play the "it sounds like it" part.
Let's deal with the abuse first.
It sounds like you're moving closer to eliminating the filibuster. Is that correct?
I answered your question.
You also just made some news by saying that you are going to run for re-election.
I said that is my expectation.
So is that a yes, that you are running for re-election?
Look, I don't know where you guys come from, man. I've never been able to travel. I'm a great respecter of fate. I've never been able to plan 3.5 years ahead for certain.
And if you do run, will Vice President Harris be on your ticket?
I would fully expect that to be the case. She's doing a great job. She's a great partner.
So stop and just think about how silly that is. Do you know what's going on? CNN's ratings have crashed. They haven't gone down. They have absolutely bottomed out. That's because the left is no longer interested because they can't hate on Donald Trump, and no one from the center right watches them. No one. Not one person. Rick Santorum cannot draw a crowd. It's not a fair gig. There aren't any fair hosts. Dana Bash is the last remotely fair host. It's all left-wingism. It's a completely partisan. It's become MSNBC, and MSNBC is better at being MSNBC than CNN. So Caitlin is looking for a moment. It's performative art. This was really a low point for the press yesterday. A low point in the middle of a national pandemic that, remember how it's claimed 500,000 lives? Remember all that? Not one question. I have to agree with Ron Klain retweeted little Tommy Vietor yesterday, complaining that there wasn't one question about the pandemic. I'm sure they rehearsed the president to talk about the pandemic, and he was ready for it. And not one question because the media doesn't care about the pandemic anymore because Trump's been beaten. It's palpable, it's obvious, and we've been talking about it for 30 years, but it keeps getting worse. And now the ratings are terrible. I'm talking to 6 million people right now. If you said to me, would you rather anchor a CNN show tonight, Hugh, or have your radio show? I'd say, give me my radio show. I talk to 6 million people every week. All I need is to be able to have a little bit of your time on the drive, and you trust me. I give you the news. By the way, a little bit of news. They've got deadlock in Israel. What else is news? What did you think? Paul in Beverly Hills.
Hey, Hugh, thanks a lot, man. Alan Dershowitz is 83 years old. He's 50 times more alert than Biden.
Well, that's true.
I'm 78. I'm up in the middle of the night operating my business.
Well, look, 78, he's not alert. He's deliberate and slow, and people who get older get more deliberate and slow. They also cantankerous.
Well, true enough, but I think he's really on the beginning of probably deep into dementia.
No, he's not, Paul. I watched that yesterday. No, he's not. That people say that to each other. He's just slow and unsure of himself and doesn't want to say the wrong thing, and he flips through his notes. He's slow Joe Biden. Thank you, Paul. JD in Las Vegas. Hey, JD. JD. He's gone. Tom in Minnesota, 1-800-520-1234. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Hugh. How are you?
Good.
Good show. Love your show all the time. Enjoy it.
Thank you.
I think he's searching for the right answers, and the frustrating part for me is a lot of them are openly false.
Well, that's true. A lot of it is simply not true. The stuff about the immigration, returning them. Let's play Cecilia Vega of ABC, cut number 7.
Please. You just listed the reasons that people are coming, talking about in-country problems, saying that it happens every year. You blamed the last administration. Sir, I just got back last night from a reporting trip to the border where I met 9-year-old José, who walked here from Honduras by himself, along with another little boy. He had that phone number on him, and we were able to call his family. His mother says that she sent her son to this country because she believes that you are not deporting unaccompanied minors like her son. That's why she sent him alone from Honduras. So, sir, you blame the last administration, but is your messaging in saying that these children are and will be allowed to stay in this country and work their way through this process, encouraging families like Joe says to come?
Well, look, the idea that I'm going to say, which I would never do, that if an unaccompanied child ends up at the border, we're just going to let them starve to death and stay on the other side. No previous administration did that either, except Trump.
Okay, let's stop for a second. It's not the question that was asked. It's not true. And Trump did not do that. No children were left on the other side of the border to starve. They didn't come. The question was, and by the way, the phone number is back to the home, the cell phone in Honduras, not to the uncle or grandpa in New York. It's so astonishingly not true. I don't understand why people just, you ought to just be shaking your head at the media. It's so not true. Frank in State College, Pennsylvania.
Good morning. My question is, what did you think of his comment when he said that there may not be a Republican Party in the next, if there is a Republican Party in the next election?
I don't recall that. If I have the audio, we'll play it. That's simply, if he said something like that, it's not true. The Republican Party is going to win the House in 2022. I went over the numbers last night, preparing a column for the Washington Post. Redistricting, they control 178 districts. Democrats control 78. Independent commissions control the rest. The Republicans are redistricted into a majority. That's just silly, stupid stuff. I didn't hear that, but that's just stupid. But thank you, Frank. We'll look for it. Frank in North Carolina.
Hello,
Frank. Hey, Frank, go ahead.
Hey, I would like to see more questions addressed with the problem with we got homeless veterans living on the street, and it seems like we're bending over backwards to put these people coming across the border up in motel rooms and spending an obscene amount of money to do that, when we're turning our back on our own citizens.
Well, there are indeed. I am very in touch with the homelessness problem in Los Angeles. I've been observing it. I've gone to the federal hearings. I've been studying it. Many of them are veterans. Most of them are not veterans, but we do have a vast homeless problem in the United States, 70,000 homeless people in Los Angeles County alone. And we just spent $6 trillion in a year. You would think that that kind of money, we could buy a house for everyone in a retirement community. Now, some of them have mental illness and they don't want to be inside. I understand that. And a lot of them are drug addicted and they need rehab. I understand that. But there's plenty of money and plenty of land. There is simply dysfunctional government. Let me ask folks, don't rage against the dying of the light. Go out there and give some money to Food for the Poor. There's a banner at HughHewitt.com. If you're worried about that 9-year-old who walked up from Honduras, our money is going to Honduras right now. When you give money at the Give Food, Get Hope banner at HughHewitt.com, you are helping Honduras. You can phone it in, 855-359-4673, 855-359-HOPE. But I think it's better to go to HughHewitt.com and click on the banner at the top. When you click on the banner at the top, it's very easy, very secure. They're the best organization in the world. $37. Feeds one child for 6 months. Give your best gift today, please. And don't forget Relief Factor. There it is. Got my time. The weekend is ahead of us. Long run and walk tomorrow morning. I have been inactive this week, recovering from the second dose of the vaccine, so I got to do a lot of miles tomorrow. And Carrie and Kirkman Resveratrol Omega will help me do that. At least 10, maybe a half marathon. I'm not sure, but I'll be out there, and maybe I'll post a picture of beautiful Huntington Beach tomorrow. That's where I go on Saturday mornings, most Saturday mornings. I will tell you, ReliefFactor.com works. I take it every day. You should too. Tens of thousands of people take it every day. Why? Because it works. $19.95 will get you started. $19.95 if you go to ReliefFactor.com. I'm coming back with Tarzana Joe. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Food for the Poor.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
You know how many times he said it now? I think it's 4. I think he has accidentally called his vice president 4 times. What do you think the mainstream news media would be doing if Donald Trump accidentally called Mike Pence President Pence 4 times? They would be a 24-hour vigil for when they were going to put a straitjacket on Trump and take him out of the White House into the local mental institution. But when Joe Biden does it, well, it's Joe Biden. Wait, let me guess. Is it his stutter again? He's got this stutter that everybody says, his defenders say, is the reason he can barely speak in complete paragraphs. He's worried about his stutter. Is that, here it was, cut one, Joe Biden talking about a vaccination center in Arizona. Listen to how he describes the Vice President of the United States.
Now, when President Harris and I took a virtual tour of a vaccination center in Arizona not long ago, one of the nurses on that tour, injecting people, giving vaccinations, said that each shot was like administering a dose of hope.
Yes, dose of hope. We're going to need it because when you watch the news, it sounds like we're all still dropping dead from COVID everywhere.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Jerry Boyer of Town Hall Finance for townhall.com. The Congressional Budget Office just released its new debt figures. The national debt this year will top 102% of GDP. This has only happened twice before, both during World War II. This number does not count the proposed $1.9 trillion stimulus bill, nor does it count the money which was borrowed from Social Security, since that's considered intergovernmental debt. Debt levels this high break the intergenerational covenant that we have with our children and grandchildren. FDR borrowed to defeat the Nazis and Imperial Japan. Money well spent. Reagan borrowed to defeat the Soviet Union. That was also money well spent. These great projects made the world better for future generations. But our political class is not buying victories against international threats. They are buying political victories for incumbents. This is nothing more than fiscal abuse, and our kids will pay the price. It needs to stop. Now. I'm Jerry Boyer.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
This isn't, as some have portrayed it, as some kind of spontaneous, random, organic response to Joe Biden being president. This is being institutionally organized.
Joined now by the poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Hello, Tarzana Joe.
Hello, Hugh. I've been reflecting on the week's events, and I've written a poem about it. What do you know? Here we go. Should there come a future moment, and that day will be resplendent, when the leaders and the notions of the right wing are ascendant, I think they should take a lesson in the paths they'll be pursuing by the tactics and the action that the left wing folks are doing. They pass a giant bill, and though the ink's not even dry, they move on to the next one. They've got bigger fish to fry. They shut down all the drilling, and they've opened up the borders, even though no one is certain of the guy who gives the orders. Next, they'll get onto the taxing. Now they've taken care of spending, while they're writing regulations that are new and never-ending. Yes, they have an ample list, checking off ad seriatim, which they run through like a race, and we're racing toward the bottom. We don't need no stinking hearings, and who wants all that debating? They know the graft they're after and don't want to be kept waiting. Yes, those lefty politicians all have very different styles, but none that I'm aware of is for reaching across the aisles. This is easy for the left, though it's impossible for some. What a pity our last speaker couldn't walk while chewing gum. Oh, I want a happy platform that has everyone agreeing, but when we have the gavel, I want no more wait and seeing. Yes, I'd love persuaded partners, and we all like making nice. But when defending liberty, alacrity's no vice. That's Extremism in Moderation by Tarzana Joe.
Extremism in Moderation, a play on Barry Goldwater's famed bit of rhetoric. Tarzana Joe, you're busy. I assume it's wedding season.
Yes, I'm getting busier by the day. And
Why aren't you at work already? You ought to be writing a bride poem as we speak.
I'm sitting right here at my writing desk.
How many times have you had to use the word gown?
Never. I've never used the word gown in a poem.
Put it down. You might be able to find something to do there. TarzanaJoe at Reagan.com for all of your poetry needs. If you need to commission a bit of verse, for better or for worse, you go to TarzanaJoe at Reagan.com. And to read today or all of Joe's poems, head to TarzanaJoe.com. Write him at TarzanaJoe at Reagan.com. Read him at TarzanaJoe.com. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
And let me remind you, if you want to listen tomorrow to a great interview, the interview with Hugh Hewitt podcast is available at SalemPodcastNetwork.com or from Spotify or Apple iTunes. The rundown is available daily if you just want to know the most important stories of the day. That comes from the first hour of the show. All of the Salem Network podcasts are at SalemPodcastNetwork.com. Also at SalemNow.com is a terrific film called Church People. You want to laugh this weekend? Go watch Church People. It will make you laugh. Stephen Baldwin's in it. It's just funny. What are church people? Church people know church people. Go watch Church People. Meanwhile, let's go back to the press conference yesterday. I want to play for you Kristen Welker of NBC, my colleague from NBC. Kristen asked about immigration, although she does get some North Korea in, cut number 9.
President, given the conditions that were just laid out at the migrant facilities at the U.S. border, will you commit to allowing journalists to have access to the facilities that are overcrowded moving forward?
I will commit when my plan very shortly is underway to let you have access to not just them, but to other facilities as well.
How soon will journalists be able to have access to the facilities? We've obviously been allowed to be inside one, but we haven't seen the facilities in which children are packed together to really give the American people a chance to see that. Will you commit to transparency on this issue?
I will commit to transparency. And as soon as I am in a position to be able to implement what we're doing right now, and one of the reasons I haven't gone down, I have all my
I bet nobody cares why you haven't gone down. He's not committing. He's saying, when I'm ready, I'll let you in. And Kristen did a good job of following up, and let's go on. She'll switch to North Carolina. I would have followed up a third time like I did with Eric Greitens. If you're not getting an answer, you can't move on because you want another question. You got to say, wait a minute, Mr. President, you're not committing. What is the absolute deadline that you'll let us in because the country wants to see what's going on? But anyway, let's go with what Kristen followed up with.
I want to become the issue. I don't want to be, bringing all the Secret Service and everybody with me to get in the way. So this is being set up, and you'll have full access to everything once we get this thing moving.
Okay, and just to be clear, how soon will that be, Mr. President?
I don't know, to be clear.
Do you bear responsibility for everything that's happening at the border now? I hear you talking a lot about the past administration. You decided to roll back some of those policies. Did you move too quickly to
roll back what? I'm sorry?
Policies. Did you move too quickly to roll back some of the executive orders of your predecessor?
First of all the policies that are underway were not helping at all. Did not slow up the amount of immigration and as many people coming. And rolling back the policies of separating children from their mothers, I make no apology for that.
Stop for a second. That policy was gone. He did roll back a bunch of policies. I don't know if he's not command of the facts or if he just can get away with lying, but that's just lying. Keep going.
Policies of remain in Mexico, sitting on the edge of the Rio Grande in a muddy circumstance with not enough to eat. I make no apologies for that. I make no apologies for ending programs that did not exist before Trump became president that have an incredibly negative impact on the law, international law, as well as on human dignity.
It's all not true. And a compliant media let him get away with it. Kristen was the toughest one, absolutely the toughest one. Hour number 2, we'll talk to Eliana about this. Eliana Johnson of the Washington Free Beacon next on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
This is Jerry Boyer of Town Hall Finance for townhall.com. The Congressional Budget Office just released its new debt figures. The national debt this year will top 102% of GDP. This has only happened twice before. both during World War II. This number does not count the proposed $1.9 trillion stimulus bill, nor does it count the money which was borrowed from Social Security, since that's considered intergovernmental debt. Debt levels this high break the intergenerational covenant that we have with our children and grandchildren. FDR borrowed to defeat the Nazis and Imperial Japan. Money well spent. Reagan borrowed to defeat the Soviet Union. That was also money well spent. These great projects made the world better for future generations. But our political class is not buying victories against international threats. They are buying political victories for incumbents. This is nothing more than fiscal abuse, and our kids will pay the price. It needs to stop. Now. I'm Jerry Boyer.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
This isn't, as some have portrayed it, as some kind of spontaneous, random, organic response to Joe Biden being president. This is being institutionally organized for the profit of the cartels, correct?
Absolutely. And the cartels understand what our politics and our policies are better than we do as Americans. And they knew where Joe Biden was leaning in his administration, and they were more than willing and more than ready to help accommodate those people to come across this country. Look, they don't just let people come across. On the other side, the cartel is regulated. They make these people pay. They give them children to, hey, here, take this kid across with you. They're less likely to stop you. Or
so this is something that I want everybody to understand. I heard this from my friend, former Commissioner for Customs and Border Protection, Mark Morgan. They are using children from the northern counties in Mexico as props so that groups of adults coming across can say, we are a family unit, so the feds have to treat them differently. Are you confirming that, Sheriff Lamb?
Yes, 100%. And out in Collin County, Texas, one of my other fellow sheriffs out there, they do interdiction on the highways out there. He says no less than 3 to 5 times they have actually pulled cars over where the people in the front had no idea who the children in the back were, and the children in the back had no idea who the people in the front were. They know what our policies are. They're using that against us. They're using children, which is despicable. And honestly, where are these parents of these people?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
They don't think that America has the qualification to speak to China from a position of strength. Cut 91.
Well, I think we thought too well of the United States. We thought that the U.S. side will follow the necessary diplomatic protocols. So for China, it was necessary that we make our position clear. So let me say here that in front of the Chinese side, the United States does not have the qualification to say that it wants to speak to China from a position of strength.
You understand what they're saying here? They're saying that, the United States doesn't have a position of strength. You mean after you destroyed our manufacturing base, debased our currency, spied on our cyber grid, they're lecturing us about strength. In one sense, they're right, but the fact that they have the cockiness to say that goes to show exactly where the international order is headed. And I'm going to tell you one thing that we should all be talking about when it comes to Joe Biden and China that we just seem to be forgetting and missing.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Dennis Prager Show.
The world shaped by reading the Washington Post, watching CNN, reading the New York Times, is not only a world of different opinion, it is a world of different apprehension of reality. They admit that. It's one of the few things left and right agree with. We do not even agree on reality. very tough to dialogue with people. They would admit this. How do you dialogue with people who have a different reality? One of us lives in a fantasy land, either conservatives or leftists. That is one of the few things they can agree on. Right? Right. One 8 Prager 776. There is a piece. I want to get this. I actually contributed to her FundMe page. Gateway Pundit and other places, but the left won't report this. I bet. I couldn't find one left-wing source. If this article is accurate, that's why you didn't send it to me. However, so I checked. It's widely reported, and there are names, and it's a doctor. That's the reason I give it credibility. I want to say at the outset, if what I'm about to read you is not accurate, I am at fault for reporting it, and all the places that reported it, including a place you respect, Gateway Pundit. But they give the school name, they give the doctor's name. I mean, that's a lot.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
I mean, we know that the Media Research Center did polling and found out among people who voted for Joe Biden, something like 30% didn't know the Hunter Biden story. And those that heard about the Hunter Biden story said up to 17% of them would not have voted for Joe Biden if they had known. This, we know for sure. This isn't any kind of conspiracy theory. We know that journalists interfered with this election in a way that journalists have never interfered with an election in the United States before, by suppressing very pertinent information. And for your listeners and your viewers, what is that pertinent information? And, it's almost like a joke, actually, Eric. And I think this film, actually, funny enough, will be funny and awfully sad and tragic and has a terrible punch in it. But here's some of the details. Here's a guy with a drug problem. And, we're Irish. We exported alcoholism around the world. We're quite sympathetic to people with addiction issues. But here's a guy with a very serious addiction issue. He goes to the Navy, he gets a special dispensation to go to the Navy as an older guy. First day he's there, he's thrown out because he got cocaine in his system. And his story, his excuse for that, is so ludicrous, it's worth telling. He says that he stopped off at a bar because he wanted a glass of water. He decided he needed a cigarette, went outside, didn't have a cigarette, and just randomly, because you know how this is, 2 South African guys offered him a cigarette laced with cocaine. Because you probably know, you live in New York, you see, Eric, you'd know how much these cocaine dealers are just handing out that cocaine for free to everyone.
Yeah, they hand it out for free. That's how I got addicted.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe.
Morning, Glory, America. Bonjour. Hi, Canada. Hope you have a good weekend ahead of you. Elena Johnson has got one foot out the door, but she stops and talks to me before she heads off to do whatever she does on the weekend. Editor-in-Chief of the Washington Free Beacon, keen observer of everything inside the Beltway. Good morning, Eliana.
Good morning, Hugh.
Your assessment of yesterday's press conference?
Not a particularly impressive performance, but given, I think, the media's posture, not a disaster for Biden. I think there were a few takeaways. The first is that he's dead set on the sequencing of legislation that he wants to get through. He seemed to wave away questions about gun control legislation and to wave away questions on immigration, frankly, and say infrastructure is coming next. And the other most significant takeaway, it seemed to me, was his
his assertion that the filibuster was a racist relic, and that seemed to me to open the door to potentially getting rid of the filibuster, because I just don't think this White House is going to have much stomach for being told it's a defender of a relic that the president has now conceded is or asserted is racist.
Well, now, that's simply not true. And I'll repeat it again. The filibuster is not a relic of Jim Crow. It's not in the Constitution. It has existed since 1806. It was last modified in the 1970s, well after the end of Jim Crow. It takes 67 votes to change it pursuant to the Senate's rules, 51 votes if they want to use the nuclear option. This is for the legislative filibuster. The filibuster for nominees was blown up by Harry Reid 7 years ago. The left wants to jam it through via 51 to 50, and so they're trying to label it as racist. None of that came up yesterday. I just stated that in 20 seconds. We had filibuster questions from Zeke Miller, Yamiche Elsinder, Sung-Min Kim, Caitlin Collins. No one stated the facts, Eliana. At what point does America turn off the news because it's simply partisan carping?
I think that's already happening. I've seen a real nosedive in the ratings of all the cable networks, but particularly CNN and MSNBC. They benefited hugely from the Trump presidency. My other thought on yesterday was on immigration. Biden really gave a haze of falsehoods, taking no responsibility for the current situation at the border, blaming it on the previous administration, mischaracterizing the previous administration's policies. And it's, having covered the Trump White House, one might have hoped, though not expected, to see pieces today with headlines along the lines of Biden asserts despite facts, or, Biden falsely asserts, et cetera, on immigration, but I don't think we're going to see those.
It should be the same thing, a fact check on Jim Crow. It's the filibuster, whatever you think, was conceived during a period when slavery was legal. It was used to delay civil rights legislation and ultimately broken, and has existed unbroken since '64 and the end of Jim Crow. It is quite simply a lie. It's been a lie. It's such a lie. But the media is, and I think the story yesterday is the White House press corps, Eliana. And I just wondered, does the Free Beacon have someone in the room? The only hard set of questions, I'm an NBC analyst, so people can correct for the lie of the green. Kristen Welker asked a series of tough questions about immigration and getting in to see the facilities, which the president did not answer. But the rest of the media, it's just in the bag for Democrats.
I think that's true. I think that the highlight was probably a reporter asserting that migrants are flooding the border because Biden is kinder than his predecessor. That may have been the highlight.
The president, I played most of it in the first hour. The question is, what do we do? I don't think he has dementia. I don't think he's incompetent. I believe he's as slow as most 78-year-olds are, and he doesn't want to get confused. And he had a briefing book which he read from, and he's being very careful not to commit the blunders for which he is famous. But what are we going to do about a media that is not a media? I mean, there is no Sam Donaldson. There is no whoever gave Trump a hard time. It was basically all of them. They're cocooning. They want to go up there and spoon with the guy.
I'm just thinking, because I don't think I have any easy answers. I simply do think that there is will be a continued fracturing of the media with the New York Times and media columnist Ben Smith has written about this. The New York Times going the way of the Guardian and other, British outlets that are explicitly partisan, and there already exists a host of right-wing outlets. I think there simply will be no mainstream. And one of the things that's really striking, Hugh, is that the smartest young people who I interview, some of whom have been at the Beacon, say that they no longer aspire to work for the New York Times. They're chastened by what they've seen happen at these institutions and by the conduct of the media that they see day to day. And whereas, let's say 15 years ago, that's what I aspired to, the smart young people today don't. They fear being defenestrated over slightest infraction. You mentioned the filibuster being labeled as racist. That's just of a piece with lots and lots of things today being labeled as racist in the service of a broader political agenda.
Yeah, what amazes to me about that, Eliana, is the little period of time which passed since Democrats used the filibuster to stop Tim Scott's police reform bill. That's just one of hundreds of examples over 4 years of Trump, but it's one that has racial overtones because Tim Scott, of course, is African American. So he brings forward a bill to change police procedures. It would have hurt the Democrats electorally, so they filibustered it. It is clearly not racist. It is clearly a procedural tool to give the minority outsized power in the Senate to force compromise and sometimes to block everything. And the government is supposed to be slow. I just think you ought to lose your card if you repeat a nostrum like that. And there is no card, but the White House press corps, they don't. Peter Doocy didn't even get called on. I don't know if the Free Beacon had anyone in the room. Did you?
No, we're actually in the process of, I've just had somebody join the White House Correspondents Association and working on putting somebody else and through that getting somebody in the room. These things are pretty tightly controlled, as I'm sure you know, through the pool controlled by the Correspondents Association.
I want to play Caitlin Collins for you. I don't know Caitlin. She came to CNN after I stopped working with them. Listen to this, cut number 11. She's clearly not listening to the answer.
But first, I'd like to follow up on a question from Yamiche, and that's on the filibuster.
That counts as a question, but go ahead.
Okay, I'll make it quick. It's a quick question. Regarding the filibuster, at John Lewis's funeral, President Barack Obama said he believed the filibuster was a relic of the Jim Crow era. Do you agree?
Yes.
If not, why not abolish it if it's a relic?
Stop right there. So he agreed. And she said, if not, it's like it was performance art, Eliana.
I actually think it was a good question and very revealing of...
it was, but she didn't listen to the answer. She said, if not. He said yes, and she wasn't prepared for yes.
Having been in these situations too, and you may not be as receptive to this given that you talk for 3 hours a day, but it's tough. It's tough and high pressure. And okay, perhaps the follow-up could have been better, but I think it was a good question, particularly because it's something that's going to be. It made news, and it's something that's going to come up again and again and again for this administration that will be hung around the president's neck and cause him a lot of grief.
Yeah, we do like to make news, by the way. I had Eric Greitens on this week, and I haven't been on the front page of a newspaper when Trump wasn't involved in 20 years. And the interview with Greitens made the front page of the Kansas City Star. I kind of thought, my gosh, is there no news in Missouri? So everybody wants to make news. But I think there's an obligation, if you're making news, to be honest. And I just think Caitlin was not, using President Obama as a classic tactic, quoting Obama to make your point as opposed to saying, is the filibuster racist? So, Eliana,
I will say, citing Obama put Biden in a difficult position, and if she hadn't, I think she would have gotten a different answer. I think it tested Biden. Granted, the follow-up could have been, Democrats have used it. Your vice president used it last year. Was it racist? When she did that, there could have been different follow-ups. But I still think it was a clever framing of the question.
I don't. I think a journalist ought to ask, if you want to ask, is the filibuster racist? That's a short question. Mr. President, is the filibuster racist? He would answer yes or no. You used the filibuster repeatedly. Did you not know it was racist? He'll give an answer. President Obama said it was racist. That's the sequence. I honestly think reporters have fallen apart. They don't know how to do the job anymore. The craft has crashed. But Eliana Johnson is resurrecting it at the Washington Free Beacon, a reporter at a time. Follow her on Twitter at Eliana Y. Johnson. Follow me to the next segment, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
What is the reality for you and your deputies when it comes to the last 58 days in America? Have things changed for you when it comes to illegal migration in your county, Sheriff?
Oh, absolutely. And it's been a disastrous change. It is not a change that we welcomed or are enjoying, that's for sure. You know, immediately overnight, we started having, the last 2 months we've had 40-plus pursuits where they end in a bailout, which means that they run from us, they stop, everybody bails out of the vehicle into the desert. Typically, they'll leave somebody behind. Like we had one where 12 people bailed out of the car and they left a 16-year-old Guatemalan girl behind, because they know that we're going to have to deal with this unaccompanied minor while all of them go free into this country. Last Wednesday alone, we had 49 apprehensions in one day. It's not uncommon for us to go out and have 20 apprehensions. And mind you, I'm 60 miles off the border. That's how far they're infiltrating into our country. Camouflage clothes. They don't want to be caught. And here's what I know I'm kind of running on, and I'll give you a second.
No. We need to know. Our listeners, our viewers need to know. So you tell us what's changed.
And what I keep telling people, this isn't about immigration anymore. This is about human trafficking and drug trafficking into this country. And if you care about human beings, it shouldn't matter what party you are. If you care about protecting those people, then you should absolutely care about border security, because the cartel is using these people to gain money. They're raping the women. They're using the children as pawns, which is clear as day right now, and they extort the men.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
I just got an email about someone who says they have to take mandated racial diversity seminar training or whatever it is. And all I have to say is that there is a piece of art, and I don't use that word lightly, that is so perfect, so funny, so politically incorrect, that hits this perfectly. It's from the legendary show The Office. Now, The Office started as an unbelievably politically incorrect show, and then it got into this kind of like quasi-woke thing later on. But the episode Diversity Day with Steve Carell, it's so politically incorrect, especially in today's time. I'm just going to tell you something right now. If I dared repeat some of the lines here, it wouldn't even be an advertiser boycott. I'd be an advertiser invasion. One of my favorite lines is Steve Carell looks into actually, this might be the pilot episode. You see, I'm not an expert in a lot of things, but I am an expert in the central canon of the first season of The Office, because it all went downhill from there. I watched it later. The first season of The Office is so well written, as if they don't care about, they just said, we are going to swing for the fences, bottom of the ninth, we want this show to catch on, that they just took huge risks. Steve Carell famously said, as Abraham Lincoln said, if you are a racist, I will attack you from the north. I highly encourage you to check it out, because we need to laugh about this stuff a little bit, because people are emailing me, Charlie, what do I do about this diversity seminar? If you think you have it bad, check out Michael Scott, who had to take the diversity class seminar.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Dennis Prager Show.
It is not normal, and my best argument is my antipathy to the veil that many Muslim women wear. It dehumanizes them. So why doesn't this mask dehumanize you?
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. This is for my listeners. If not for you, I wouldn't be doing what I love to do. Good morning, America. I hope you're ready for a good weekend. Let me check the markets yesterday, brought to you by Birch Gold. Last night I was out with John Campbell and the captivating Mrs. Campbell and the fetching Mrs. Hewitt. And talk turned to, they live in Arizona now, and what are you doing for retirement and your investments and diversification? John's a smart guy. Diversify, diversify, diversify. And I always believe people ought to own a little bit of precious metals, a lot of stock, and some real estate. Some people own bond funds. That's not for me. I don't understand them well enough. I don't know why they go up and down. And so I leave that to the specialist. If you're going to get a bond fund, use a mutual fund specialist. But be diversified. Have a lot of different things. Don't go crazy and buy Bitcoin and stuff like that. I know some of you are all on Twitter about Bitcoin. If it's still here in 20 years, we can talk about it. But in the meantime, dirt doesn't move. Own some dirt. And gold is always going to retain value. It has for 4,000 years. I don't think it's going to go away. Birch Gold sells you gold. They do it two ways. They'll sell you the gold if you go to hughgold.com, or if you text my name, Hugh, H-U-G-H, to the number 474747. They will send you all the information on Birch Gold. They also do one thing very, very well. They diversify your retirement income. So if you've got a 401k or an IRA, and it's all in cash, or it's all in stocks, or it's all in whatever it is, they'll take 10 to 25% of that. And I stick to the 10% because I think that's about right for precious metals. Ask them to do it for you. They don't buy you a gold stock. They don't buy you a spider or any of the exotic things. They buy the amount of gold on the spot market that gold is worth. This morning, gold is at $1,721.80 an ounce. All right, so that'll go up and down throughout the day, and I never tell you which way the market's going. I know overseas, England and Germany are having very good days, up 0.75% and 0.8%, but a morning show just can't get into predicting the market. It's not close to the close. We don't know what's going to be announced. But I can tell you one thing about gold. It's going to be gold. Gold people, your gold is never going to be worthless. People are still going to be telling you what the spot price is in 30 years. And if you go to Birch Gold, they'll put it in a vault, they'll lock it up, and they'll put your name on it, and it's yours. Yesterday, the NASDAQ was up 99, the Dow was down 234, and the S&P was off 2 points. As I said, Europe is up today. We don't know what's going to happen here. The 10-year Treasury stayed level at 1.73 yesterday, 1.73 this morning. That's what you need to know about Birch Gold. Now, let me also please appeal to my audience. It's the weekend. You're going to have a great time. You're going to have fun. Restaurants are filling back up again as Americans get vaccinated. I know we don't wear symbols in this country. We're not going to put a red letter V on symbols ever since the Holocaust had become verboten, even though this would be a symbol of having done something good as opposed to being a hated minority by the Nazis. This would be a good symbol. V is for victory, V is for vaccine. We're not going to do that. Just believe that if someone is older and they're not wearing a mask, the overwhelming likelihood is that they've been vaccinated. Now, some of the public health officials say you should wear a mask anyway. That's not persuasive to many people, and they're not going to. They went through the vaccine protocol, and they're just going to live their life. And I don't know what to do about that. It'd be good to have it would be good to have Joe Biden give a rather long explanation of why mask wearing is still necessary, even after you've been vaccinated. The answer is a rather exotic extrapolation of the possibility of variants infecting you that are not stopped, or of asymptomatic transmission by those of you who have had the vaccine but still carry the virus. But I don't think President Biden is quite capable of delivering that. In any event, food for the poor needs your help. I saw the restaurant was full last night. If you can go to a restaurant, you can please contribute to Food for the Poor. The banner is over at HughHewitt.com. Instead of going, just wait one more weekend before you go out and give that money. Make it your Lenten. You didn't do anything for Lent this year because it didn't feel like Lent. Go to the Food for the Poor banner at HughHewitt.com and be generous. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
This isn't, as some have portrayed it, as some kind of spontaneous, random, organic response to Joe Biden being president. This is being institutionally organized for the profit of the cartels, correct?
Absolutely. And the cartels understand what our politics and our policies are better than we do as Americans. And they knew where Joe Biden was leaning in his administration, and they were more than willing and more than ready to help accommodate those people to come across this country. Look, they don't just let people come across. On the other side, the cartel is regulated. They make these people pay. They give them children to, hey, here, take this kid across with you. They're less likely to stop you. Or
so this is something that I want everybody to understand. I heard this from my friend, former Commissioner for Customs and Border Protection, Mark Morgan. They are using children from the northern counties in Mexico as props so that groups of adults coming across can say, we are a family unit, so the feds have to treat them differently. Are you confirming that, Sheriff Lamb?
Yes, 100%. And out in Collin County, Texas, one of my other fellow sheriffs out there, they do interdiction on the highways out there. He says no less than 3 to 5 times they have actually pulled cars over where the people in the front had no idea who the children in the back were, and the children in the back had no idea who the people in the front were. They know what our policies are. They're using that against us. They're using children, which is despicable. And honestly, where are these parents of these people?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
They don't think that America has the qualification to speak to China from a position of strength. Cut 91.
外交礼节.
Well, I think we thought too well of the United States. We thought that the U.S. side will follow the necessary diplomatic protocols.
所以我们刚才必须阐明我们的立场。
So for China, it was necessary that we make our position clear.
我现在讲一句，你们没有资格在中国的面前说你们从实力的地位出发同中国谈话。
So let me say here that in front of the Chinese side, the United States does not have the qualification to say that it wants to speak to China from a position of strength.
You understand what they're saying here? They're saying that, the United States doesn't have a position of strength. You mean after you destroyed our manufacturing base, debased our currency, spied on our cyber grid, they're lecturing us about strength. In one sense, they're right, but the fact that they have the cockiness to say that goes to show exactly where the international order is headed. And I'm going to tell you one thing that we should all be talking about when it comes to Joe Biden and China that we just seem to be forgetting and missing.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Dennis Prager Show.
The world shaped by reading the Washington Post, watching CNN, reading the New York Times, is not only a world of different opinion, it is a world of different apprehension of reality. They admit that. It's one of the few things left and right agree with. We do not even agree on reality. It's very tough to dialogue with people. They would admit this. How do you dialogue with people who have a different reality? One of us lives in a fantasy land, either conservatives or leftists. That is one of the few things they can agree on. Right? Right. Prager 776. There is a piece. I want to get this. I actually contributed to her FundMe page. Gateway Pundit and other places, but the left won't report this. I bet. I couldn't find one left-wing source. If this article is accurate, that's why you didn't send it to me. However, so I checked. It's widely reported, and the names. There are names. and it's a doctor. That's the reason I give it credibility. I want to say at the outset, if what I'm about to read you is not accurate, I am at fault for reporting it. Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt here, joined by Jonathan Swan of Axios. I think Jonathan is one of the best, if not the best, reporters in Washington. You got a great story in Axios about supersizing spending, which I want to get into the details of. But Jonathan, first, I have a trick question for you. It's actually not a trick question. It's a tough question, though. Do you consider it accurate to say that the filibuster is a relic of the Jim Crow era?
No, because it was formed so far before the Jim Crow era.
Correct.
So I don't view it as a relic. I obviously it was used to impede civil rights legislation, including famously, but no, I don't view it that way.
And it was last renewed and reformed in the 70s.
Yeah,
and therefore that's after the Jim Crow. So when reporters, as happened yesterday, used President Obama's patently false statement to set up a question about killing the filibuster because it's a Jim Crow relic, are they acting responsibly? Because anyone who saw Caitlin Collins ask that would believe, oh, it's a relic of the Jim Crow era. And President Biden said yes, and it hasn't been fact-checked anywhere. It's just not true.
Oh, I disagree. I thought Caitlin actually, I'm not just circling the wagons. I actually thought her questions were some of the best at the press conference because she got Biden to say that and then very quickly in follow-up said, okay, so what are you going to do about it? And it just showed, I think what I learned, that press conference was basically worthless yesterday. Completely worthless. But what I learned from it, Hugh, it was actually it was the tone of Biden, what he said. I came away from that press conference based on what he said about voting rights to filibuster, more convinced than I was before it that he's going to actually lean in and apply real pressure on Joe Manchin and others later in the year. I could just, again, I don't have the reporting to back that up, but just watching him and listening to him. And so I thought it was perfectly fine of her to say, Obama has said this. Do you agree with this as a proposition?
We could not disagree more. That was performance art. And by the way, she didn't listen to the answer. Let's play you cut number 11 is Caitlin.
For you, but first, I'd like to follow up on a question from Yamiche, and that's on the filibuster.
That counts as a question, but go ahead.
Okay, I'll make it quick. It's a quick question. You can. Regarding the filibuster, at John Lewis's funeral, President Barack Obama said he believed the filibuster was a relic of the Jim Crow era. Do you agree?
Yes.
If not, why not abolish it?
Stop. She says, if not, which is non-responsive.
Okay, all right. I'm not going to defend every piece of it. I forgot about the if not, but generally speaking, I thought it was a pretty good 1-2.
Well, it was set up for a television moment, but we have learned that press conferences are performative art. And the straight question, just a straight question is the filibuster racist? That's a straight question. And I think the media is so far left, Jonathan, you're not. I don't know how we save it. Now, let's go to your story, which is wonderful and accurately reported and a revelation to me. Would you summarize it first for people? Biden to supersize spending.
So right now, many people, when you saw the figure floated in the New York Times of Biden looking at his second spending package of $3 trillion, many people's eyes sort of popped out of their head. This is a huge number, $3 trillion over 10 years. But I spoke to sources who are on the internal call of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the House Progressive Caucus. So these are progressive Democrats. There's a very powerful bloc in the House. And they were very, very, this is in their private conversation, they haven't floated this publicly yet, but they are adamant many of these people that $3 trillion is vastly lower than what they want. And some of them are discussing making a demand for as much as $1 trillion per year in new spending on climate. You know, a lot of this is basically pushing climate change, initiatives into an infrastructure bill. So this is going to be a really big fight between the ideological factions of the Democratic Party. When Biden rolls this out next week, do not expect there to be, confetti fired off from the progressives. They're actually very underwhelmed by that figure and are going to be quite aggressive privately and publicly in advocating for a much bigger spend.
Now, that's what I found interesting. They want a much bigger spend. The only way to get that under the current rules is through the second reconciliation. I have a technical question, which I don't know the answer to. How soon can the budget committees pass a budget pursuant to which a second reconciliation bill can pass?
So I don't know the technical answer to that, but my understanding is it can be done in the next couple of months. That it's likely to be, done in the next couple of months. But I think most people think that this is sort of a September proposition to get this through.
You see, this is unprecedented to do two reconciliations within a span of a year. Normally, what the Republicans did under Trump was the first reconciliation in 2017 was on health care. The second on taxes was in 2018. Here, the Democrats, I don't think it's illegal. I don't think it's unconstitutional.
Wait, wasn't taxes 2017 too at the end?
It may have been at the end. I thought it was early 2018. I'd have to go back and look.
Both in 17.
But the idea is they're going to jam those through on reconciliation. It's not unconstitutional. It's not illegal. They have a Congress that covers two budgets. They can do it. The question is, will Joe Manchin, in a 51-50 vote for massive tax hikes on individuals and corporations? What is the answer to that? Because they're not going to break the filibuster here. They're going to just try for 51-50.
Well, I think from my conversations anyway with people who are involved in the discussions around this package, this is going to be in some ways the Rebuild West Virginia bill. So, they're not stupid. They know Joe Manchin wants to go back to West Virginia and, be the king, bring rural broadband and so I'm being a little bit hyperbolic here, but, just picture, Joe Manchin sort of striding into West Virginia and the roads are paved, plated in gold and there's high-speed broadband there and everything's, wonderful. So they're going to give him so much that it's going to be very hard for him to walk away from it. Now, I think there's a conversation, is he going to be comfortable with 28? Hiking the corporate tax rate to 28, probably not. He's indicated that that's probably a bit too high, so maybe the corporate rate settles around 25. But I think the incentives are going to be so high for him as it relates to his own state that I think it's going to be pretty difficult for him to walk away from it.
You see, then they have to go work on Kristen Sinema, who is trying to establish for herself the John McCain legacy in Arizona. And there's an Angus King problem. Angus King is a governor. He knows you can't get away with this. There are other few Democrats who will recoil, who understand basic economics, that the deficit does matter. At some point, it matters. It must theoretically have a limit after which the currency becomes worthless. And so the question becomes, is there any Democrat who is hoping Joe Manchin takes the bullet, but will step up and take the bullet for them if the progressives push over the line? And indeed, are there any House members who are balking at the they will lose their seats. They'll get wiped out if they do this.
No. That's a really important point, Hugh, what you just said at the end, because all the focus, disproportionate focus of coverage is on Sinema, Manchin, and they should be focused on because they're really important figures for all this stuff. But the House is so narrowly divided. When you look at someone like Josh Gottheimer in New York and some of the House problem solvers, the Democrats that are in the problem solvers group, the more moderate members, a lot of them are really worried about their re-elections. They're really worried about having their name attached to tax hikes. And Pelosi has shown that she's very, very good at, keeping a caucus together and ramming it through. Look, a lot of them in private of these members are nervous about that, but the test will be, are they willing to actually defy Pelosi on this signature piece of legislation? I don't know the answer to that question, but history suggests that there's not too many of them that when it really comes to the crunch on important votes, they're willing to defy Pelosi.
I can look down the Problem Solvers Conference and tell you Jim Costa of California is in trouble if he votes for this. I can tell you Connor Lamb is in trouble if he votes for this. I can tell you Alyssa Slotkin won't vote for it anyway, and Abigail Spangenberger is not going to vote for it. So that's 4. Only one more needs to say no to a crazy bill, and it doesn't get out of the House unless they steal the Meeks seat in Iowa. And I think Nancy Pelosi is really considering stealing the Meeks seat. What do you think, Jonathan Swan?
I don't think she's going to have the support for it. There are too many Democrats who are really nervous about this idea, so soon after condemning Trump for trying to overturn and object to do it themselves. I just don't see that happening. And so, we'll see. But I think there's so much anxiety within her caucus about this that it's not a non-starter.
So the real reporting, I don't know if you're going to do this, but someone at Axios should go and find the 28 members of the alleged Problem Solver Caucus and put them on the record right now. Because it seems to me what you talk to, your reporting is on the progressive side. That's just not the House. It's like they've got an amplification.
Can I say something, Hugh?
Yeah.
You're a very good assignment editor because one of my colleagues is literally doing that right now, like literally taking the tax proposals to every single member of the Problem Solvers Caucus. So we are in the process of doing that you're exactly right, and we are literally doing it right now.
When is that going to show up? Because that's the key thing.
I don't know, because the problem is they're out of session, so you have to. It's a pain in the ass. They can avoid you more easily, so you have to go through their staffs. With all of them. Some of them are more direct than others, but one of my colleagues is literally doing that right now.
Oh, that's why I read Axios in the morning and why I welcome you, Jonathan Swan, anytime you want. Great story. Really good reporting. We disagree about the White House press corps, which I'm afraid has just been captured by the left and by the narrative. But we think you do a good job.
No,
Thank you, Jonathan.
About Caitlin Collins. We disagree about Caitlin Collins.
Oh, I think she's a fine reporter.
I'm not making any grand pronouncements about, I think she actually was. I thought she was one of the best in that press conference. So.
Well, Kristen did a good job, too. I just don't believe it.
She was good.
Did you happen to hear?
Was great.
Did you hear my interview with Eric Greitens this week?
It was fabulous.
Well, no, it was just fair. It was just no setup. I just went to the questions and no setup. And I wish reporters would go back to...
Tell me this, Hugh. Tell me this. You think, look, Cecilia Vega, ABC, don't you think she was pretty great?
No, that's not. It's a story based on one child. You need to ask genuine questions about the massive nature of the problem, not narrative questions.
No, I totally disagree with you. She went down there. She did the report. You have to actually sometimes illustrate a point through an individual. And she said that she spoke to these people and they were coming because of Joe Biden.
It's not, but that's not representative of everybody. I mean, it's so far.
There's been a huge, I can't believe you're saying this. There's been a huge surge, and you're saying it has nothing to do with Biden's rhetoric or policy?
I am saying there is a huge surge. And I think it would be a fine question to say there's been a huge surge, Mr. President. The number is 9,000 in February. Are you responsible for it? I would not extrapolate from one 9-year-old to try and put the president on the spot. I just think journalism has lost its way. Jonathan, thank you. You haven't. And don't forget Relief Factor, America. I'm going to send Jonathan some Relief Factor because he's a great guest and a great reporter. And he also walks a long way to get his scoop, so he needs ReliefFactor.com. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined now by former Missouri Senator Jim Talent. Good morning, Senator. How are you?
Doing great, Hugh. How are you? You've been
good.
A name mentioned in Missouri a fair amount the last couple of days.
You know, I've never been on the front page of the Kansas City Star before, and I was yesterday. Did you listen to my Eric Greitens interview?
I read it. I read the transcript, yeah.
Was I fair?
I think you were scrupulously fair, and I think the issue here, Hugh, is what do we want the Senate race to be about? Do we want it to be about, Biden's border policies and the tax increases that are coming and the abuse of executive authority, or do we want it to be about Eric Greitens' scandals while he was the governor? And because if it's about, that's what it will be about if he's the nominee. The interview, you were scrupulously fair. Other people in the media won't be. These Senate races, and I know this, Hugh, I mean, they attract international attention in a way governor's races do not. And he's going to have incoming from all over the world, and a lot of it's going to be deserved. And we just don't need the Senate race to be about that. And I've said this in interviews. I mean, look, if he wanted to vindicate himself, he should have stayed on in office and fought it out the way President Trump did. You don't leave. I understand why he left, but you don't leave and then come back and make the Senate race about the issues you didn't litigate when you were governor.
What I was frustrated about is he kept claiming he'd been exonerated by conflating 3 different investigations. It's very difficult to explain to an audience he was investigated by a not very good and possibly partisan St. Louis prosecutor. He was investigated by the Missouri legislature, and he was investigated by the Missouri Ethics Commission. And it's impossible to explain that. And he purposefully conflated, Jim. That's what made me less than patient with him.
Yeah, and I don't know that he was exonerated in any one of the 3. I mean, and look, I don't want to have to go back and reread all this stuff. That is not what the Senate race ought to be about. There are too big an issues. It's not fair to the party or the state. Now
you know Missouri pretty well. I think Jason Smith is going to run a congressman. I believe Ann Wagner is going to run a congresswoman, and I know that Eric Schmidt is going to run the attorney general.
Right.
If it's a 4-way race, does Eric Greitens win simply on his combativeness?
No, look, no, I don't think so. These other candidates are very strong. We don't know about the 2 members of the congressional delegation. They're looking at it. They're great people. Our attorney general is a fine public servant, and I think the primary voters in Missouri are going to do the right thing. But I do think we have to get the message out, and glad you did.
Why?
It was a Hugh Hewitt interview. I guess he should have known to be better prepared.
Why does Missouri have an August primary? You know how badly that hurts Republicans. Why have they never changed it?
I've never asked that question, and even in the years when I was in the legislature, and so I was part of the group that had control over that. It's always been that way. We tend to have a later primary, and I think people are just used to it and don't want it to change. Sometimes it hurts us, sometimes it helps us. It depends. In the old days, the Democrats had more contested primaries, so I guess you could argue it hurt them.
Okay, well, the August primary I hate. It hurts us in Arizona as well. I want to ask you about the filibuster. It is not a relic of Jim Crow. It is wrong to say so. It's a lie to say so. It began in 1806. It was used by segregationists to defend Jim Crow, but it's been most recently reformed in the 70s, 30 years after the end of Jim Crow. What do you think is going to happen to it? Will Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema, Angus King, and sane people save it?
Yeah, I don't think it's going anywhere. I think a lot of this is about, threats and counter threats in an attempt to get Mitch McConnell, and it's not going to work, to just let some of these bills come up. Okay. Now, look, we talked about the filibuster. I'm not a huge fan. I think in the long run, it hurts the conservative agenda because we need to be able to pass laws to control the administrative state. If the Democrats wanted to have like an 18-month sort of task force to investigate rules changes and recommend things which would not go into effect until the next Congress, and we don't know who's going to control either house in the next Congress, I think that's something we could look at. But you don't change it after having defended it the way they did all these years in order to try and get 1 or 2 highly controversial and partisan bills up. And I don't think the Senate's going to do that. And I think there's more than just Manchin and Sinema also.
No, on the House side, I've got to ask you quickly. Jonathan Swan just reported the progressives want to put a $3 trillion plus bill through reconciliation. Now, that's allowed. They can raise taxes and spend as much money as they can. But is there any part of the House Democrats, they only have a 5-vote margin, that will resist that?
Yeah, I've been waiting to see when some of these moderates are going to jump off the train. Now, they're going to do everything they can to pressure them from the base and all this stuff. But at a certain point, I think they're going to start saying, hey, we've got to run in districts, that are not San Francisco. So let's just keep watching.
And those districts are going to be new. They don't even know what their districts are going to be.
Exactly right.
It's astonishing. The Jonathan Swan thing is very upsetting because they're going to attempt to pass 10 years of progressive, quote, left-wing spending in 10 weeks. It's really radical. Jim Talent, always a pleasure to speak with you, my friend. Coming right back with Larry Arnn in the Hillsdale Dialogue, America. Go nowhere except to Food for the Poor. The banner is at the top of the HughHewitt.com website. Please, please, please be generous. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
This isn't, as some have portrayed it, as some kind of spontaneous, random, organic response to Joe Biden being president. This is being institutionally organized for the profit of the cartels, correct?
Absolutely. And the cartels understand what our politics and our policies are better than we do as Americans. And they knew where Joe Biden was leaning in his administration, and they were more than willing and more than ready to help accommodate those people to come across this country. Look, they don't just let people come across. On the other side, the cartel is regulated. They make these people pay. They give them children to, hey, here, take this kid across with you. They're less likely to stop you. Or
so this is something that I want everybody to understand. I heard this from my friend, former Commissioner for Customs and Border Protection, Mark Morgan. They are using children from the northern counties in Mexico as props so that groups of adults coming across can say, we are a family unit, so the feds have to treat them differently. Are you confirming that, Sheriff Lamb?
Yes, 100%. And out in Collin County, Texas, one of my other fellow sheriffs out there, they do interdiction on the highways out there. He says no less than 3 to 5 times they have actually pulled cars over where the people in the front had no idea who the children in the back were, and the children in the back had no idea who the people in the front were. They know what our policies are. They're using that against us. They're using children, which is despicable. And honestly, where are these parents of these people?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
They don't think that America has the qualification to speak to China from a position of strength. Cut 91.
外交礼节
Well, I think we thought too well of the United States. We thought that the U.S. side will follow the necessary diplomatic protocols.
所以我们刚才必须阐明我们的立场。
So for China, it was necessary that we make our position clear.
我现在讲一句，你们没有资格在中国的面前说你们从实力的地位出发同中国谈话。
So let me say here that in front of the Chinese side, the United States does not have the qualification to say that it wants to speak to China from a position of strength.
You understand what they're saying here? They're saying that, the United States doesn't have a position of strength. You mean after you destroyed our manufacturing base, debased our currency, spied on our cyber grid, they're lecturing us about strength. In one sense, they're right, but the fact that they have the cockiness to say that goes to show exactly where the international order is headed. And I'm going to tell you one thing that we should all be talking about when it comes to Joe Biden and China that we just seem to be forgetting and missing.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
The world shaped by reading the Washington Post, watching CNN, reading the New York Times is not only a world of different opinion, it is a world of different apprehension of reality. They admit that. It's one of the few things left and right agree with. We do not even agree on reality. It's very tough to dialogue with people. They would admit this. How do you dialogue with people who have a different reality? One of us lives in a fantasy land, either conservatives or leftists. That is one of the few things they can agree on. Right? Right. 1-8-PRAGER-776. There is a piece. I want to get this. I actually contributed to her FundMe page. Gateway Pundit and other places, but the left won't report this, I bet. I couldn't find one left-wing source. If this article is accurate, that's why you didn't send it to me. However, so I checked. It's widely reported, and there are names, and it's a doctor. That's the reason I give it credibility. I want to say at the outset, if what I'm about to read you is not accurate, I am at fault for reporting it, and all the places that reported it, including a place you respect, Gateway Pundit. But they give the school name, they give the doctor's name. I mean, that's a lot.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
I mean, we know that the Media Research Center did polling and found out among people who voted for Joe Biden, something like 30% didn't know the Hunter Biden story. And those that heard about the Hunter Biden story said up to 17% of them would not have voted for Joe Biden if they had known. This, we know for sure. This isn't any kind of conspiracy theory. We know that journalists interfered with this election in a way that journalists have never interfered with an election in the United States before, by suppressing very pertinent information. And for your listeners and your viewers, what is that pertinent information? And, it's almost like a joke, actually, Eric. And I think this film, actually, funny enough, will be funny and awfully sad and tragic and has a terrible punch in it. But here's some of the details. Here's a guy with a drug problem. And, we're Irish. We exported alcoholism around the world. We're quite sympathetic to people with addiction issues. But here's a guy with a very serious addiction issue. He goes to the Navy, he gets a special dispensation to go to the Navy as an older guy. First day he's there, he's thrown out because he got cocaine in his system. And his story, his excuse for that, is so ludicrous, it's worth telling. He says that he stopped off at a bar because he wanted a glass of water. He decided he needed a cigarette, went outside, didn't have a cigarette, and just randomly, because you know how this is, 2 South African guys offered him a cigarette laced with cocaine. Because you probably know, you live in New York, you see, Eric, you'd know how much these cocaine dealers are just handing out that cocaine for free to everyone.
Yeah, they hand it out for free. That's how I got addicted.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
I just get tired of people blaming racism for any time there's statistical differences along race and ethnicity. And you brought up the case in point about the NBA and NFL. We as Black people were overly represented in these areas, and yet we never hear boo that that's racist. But everywhere else, we scream racism, and I just wish that we would just go a little bit deeper in the analysis whenever we see these things. What is it in the culture? Is it in
Glory America, bonjour, hi Canada. That music means it is the last radio hour of the week. Time for the Hillsdale Dialogue on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Each week I talk with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, and one of his colleagues. As yesterday, Daryl Hart was our guest. Professor Hart is back today. Yesterday we did a special edition of the Hillsdale Dialogue in order to catch up with the Hillsdale Reader. We were talking about Jonathan Edwards yesterday with Dr. Hart and Dr. Arnn, and they're back today to talk about none other than George Whitefield. Good morning, gentlemen. Dr. Hart, I gather we didn't abuse you too much. You're back for a second round.
Yeah, no, it's good to be back. Thank you for having me.
Larry, are you going to up your game now to make sure he never comes back again?
No, I don't need to do that. I can take care of that in many ways.
So look, we left off yesterday. People were very surprised. I played Jonathan Edwards for them in hour 2 yesterday, and they were very shocked to hear all things Hillsdale in a different part. But occasionally that brings in a new audience member. Let's begin, Dr. Hart, with the connection between Edwards and Whitefield, and then Ben Franklin, and indeed the Wesley brothers. It's a tight-knit group of very famous names.
Yes. Well, the Wesleys were English. Edwards, not yet American, never fully American. He's a colonist, so he's still part of the British system. But Edwards and Whitefield didn't know each other until Whitefield came to America. He came in 1738 to help with a orphanage in Georgia. He was a parish priest, actually, in Savannah, and then he returned in 1739 and began a tour to raise money for the orphanage in Georgia. And at a certain point there, he met Edwards by going through Massachusetts. He was likely aware, though, of the surprising narrative that we talked about yesterday that Edwards had written. I'm not sure if he was aware, but that was published 1736 and 7 in England and Scotland. So there's a good chance that Whitefield would have known about Edwards, but it was with Whitefield that the awakening became a big phenomenon. With Edwards, it was largely a local endeavor in particular churches scattered in the colonies, but Whitefield was like the Beatles coming to America. It made it a big deal.
Now, for a moment, I want to talk about voice. Now, I'm at the end of the radio week, and my voice is a little bit worn down, but when I give a speech, I often go into my radio voice, and it's a deeper, resonant voice, which works with microphone. Usually, people like Lincoln in the pre-auditory age, when people had to rely on their own pipes, high and reedy was better for being heard. What is George Whitefield, perhaps the greatest orator of the 18th century's voice like?
It had to be booming. Franklin records that he estimates Whitefield spoke to over 20,000 at one event at the corner of 2nd and Market Street in colonial Philadelphia. He spoke in fields. I mean, this is obviously all before electricity and amplification, electronic amplification of voices. So I would imagine it was a deep baritone sort of voice, but that's the way I've just imagined it. I'm not sure if anyone recorded the actual timbre of his voice, but
let me ask Dr. Arnn here. I am right, am I not, Dr. Arnn, that Lincoln's voice was high?
Yeah, very much. But also surprisingly high to his audience. When they started, Lincoln, part of his art was he made a terrible first impression. He was gawky, he was disheveled, his suits were worn out, and then he would start talking, and this tall man would produce these high, you call them reedy, notes. And so there was stirring. There's a very close account of this at Lincoln's Cooper Union address, which was very important because it announced him to the East. By the end of it, everybody was simply spellbound, and they'd forgotten all that. In fact, they would often sit still after Lincoln finished. Well, the accounts of Whitfield are just like that. I mean, he was they were mentioned. Ben Franklin, who was his friend, and admired him very much. He went to one of those things, one of those large gatherings, believing that it's false that Whitfield could talk to so many people and be heard, and he even measured it out, so many paces until he couldn't hear him anymore. And then he calculated how many people could fit in a semicircle of 500 feet. That's where he got 30,000 or 20,000. And so, yeah, he had and see, he was Billy Graham, right? He was. I mean, if you, there's a movie out about Billy Graham that everybody ought to watch because I just think he was a galvanizing guy. And this is like that. It was news when he came to town, and everybody turned out.
Spellbinding is a term we often hear used but don't often reflect on. Spellbinding in the world drenched with Harry Potter, maybe it makes more sense. People who are bound up, who cannot move. Do you have any idea, either of you, when spellbinding came into currency and was it applied to Whitfield?
I don't know the first part of that answer. I would add, though, to the effects of Whitfield, he was trained as an actor, and historians have made something of that, and so he knew how to deliver lines, so to speak. That doesn't take away from his remarkable talents or from his ministry, but he was trained, and there are accounts of women and children fainting whenever he said the word Mesopotamia. I don't know if that fits with spellbinding or knockout power, but there's something going on with the way he could speak. And the other thing I don't know if you were going to bring this up, but the thing that I still marvel at is that he did this for 30 years, and he was giving it's estimated 500 sermons a year, and oftentimes speaking in these places outdoors. I mean, Hugh, you do the show 3 hours a day, okay, that's a lot, but you do have a microphone. But for Whitfield to travel the way he did, as crude as travel was, and then to be speaking the way he did, it's hard to fathom anyone actually having that kind of physical strength.
No, actually, radio people are astonished by this. Because when you do 15 hours of radio a week, by the 15th hour, which this is, your voice begins to give out a little bit, and you need the weekend off, and you don't want to do any speaking. But mostly, you don't travel. You don't have to put up with up and down and yelling at people, and you don't have to amplify. If I drop my voice a little bit lower, Adam can gain up the machine to increase it. If I even whisper a little bit, he can begin to gain up the machine. That's not available to George Whitfield. So he is preaching the gospel. He is delivering an important message. But I'm sure, Dr. Arnn, you've had probably hundreds of professors come through Hillsdale. Every one of them has a unique voice imprint, but some of them are more memorable than others. Am I correct?
Well, yeah, we've got the recently retired, most decorated Professor of the Year, Tom Connor. And anytime we need somebody, he still lives in town, anytime we need somebody to read something, with the orchestra, anything. Automatically everybody says, "Get Tom to do it," and he's just got that wonderful, big, deep voice, and it travels, and he's got a sympathetic tone to it. Now, by the way, I've looked up the etymology of the word spellbound and see that it dates from 1742.
Oh my!
And that means it might be applicable to George Whitfield.
Exactly.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
We learn things every day, and I'm actually surprised. You have books in your house.
Well, Hugh, it's hard for me to explain what this is, but I'm a scholar.
No, I mean, you must have gone into Mrs. Arnn's room or something, because I'm actually amazed. You look something up.
Oh, yeah.
That's an admission against interest.
Yeah. Of course. Here's a tip for your readers. If you want to know what a word means, look up from what it derives. This word is an entirely English word. There's no Greek or Latin or Germanic or Old English or etymology of it. It's I bet you it comes from charismatic preaching. Well, there's a thing called the Online Etymology Dictionary, which is the work of life's work, loving work of one individual guy, and it's free and it's excellent. And the Oxford English Dictionary is the standard, and I think there's a free online version of that. Of course, we get it through our library, but this Online Etymology Dictionary is just a tremendous tool, and I urge people, when they look up the meaning of a word, start with the etymology.
That is fascinating, and it's an English word from the period. When we return, more on George Whitefield. Go nowhere, America.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Food for the Poor.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. We skipped over something in this week's Hillsdale Dialogue with Professor Daryl Hart, president of Hillsdale College, Larry Arnn. All things Hillsdale are collected at hillsdale.edu. All of the dialogues at hughforhillsdale.com. My friend and colleague Charlie Kirk is listening to them all. I recommend that you do the same thing. It's a fun way to go where you haven't gone before, into the breadth and depth of the Western experience. Well, we skipped over Dr. Hart. He's an Oxford guy. We're not going to hold that against him like we do against Arnn, but he was the lowest rank of Oxford undergraduates. Can you explain a little bit about his college experience, George Whitfield's?
You mean me?
No. Oh, you go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, Daryl, explain.
Okay. Well, he came from a family of innkeepers, and the business was failing, and so he needed to work as a servant, doing work for professors, faculty there, in order to receive credit for his tuition. So that's not the typical Oxford experience, especially as portrayed in things like Evelyn Waugh's Brideshead Revisited, which a lot of Americans kind of get nostalgic about Oxbridge life through movies like that. But he also then was a friend and associate of the Wesleys, Charles Wesley and John Wesley, and they were in a holy club, which, you know, is kind of a strange name in a way, but that's what they were interested in. They were interested in pursuing holiness. So it was a very devout group of students, and he converted through those meetings and his contacts with the Wesleys.
Now, he is a member of Fellows College. Dr. Arnn, I believe you were at King's College. I'm not sure. Are these Fellows commoners, the servant students, still a feature of the universities?
No. And I was in Worcester College, and King's College is in Cambridge.
Wait a minute. No, New College. I thought you were at New College. You sent me to the New College Chapel.
A lot, but that's, you know, there are 30 of them, Hugh, and the old ones. Worcester College is middle aged, but New College is named New College because it came after University College and one or two others. And so it's the New College, and that was 650 years ago.
It's really something. And everybody who knows anything about Oxford is now watching Endeavor, the PBS show, because it's shot there. But are you surprised about Fellows having servants among their students? That does seem rather medieval.
Well, see, there are great things about that, but also evils in it, too. So Whitfield got to go to college in part because he worked. And he worked his way through college, and that's how he did it. Now, at Hillsdale College, 80% of our kids have some kind of a job. But the evils that come from it, especially in the lower school, in what they call public school in Britain, the hazing has, it's not so much anymore. Probably still some, though. But it borders on the cruel. And if you want to understand what that's like, read C.S. Lewis' Surprised by Joy, because his tales of the lower parts of public school before he left it and went to study with a man named Kirkpatrick, it was just a misery to him.
That's why I like Dickens. Dickens describes public schools so well, Steerforth and David Copperfield being two of the graduates who are most memorable from that time. But here we are in the 1700s, and a student club member. The Wesleys are not there on charity, are they, a doctor?
No, I don't believe they are. I don't know for sure, but their father was a priest in the Church of England, and I suspect that there were enough provisions for them to go the regular route, which was not exactly regular because this was still a very, very exclusive form of education. But no, I don't think they were there in that kind of working capacity.
When we come back, I want to talk just a little bit more about this club, because it's a club that changed the world, and it began in an Oxford, I don't know, commons room or dorm room or something, but the people who participated in it did indeed change the world, primarily through George Whitfield, but the Wesleys were no mean preachers themselves. Don't go anywhere, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Don't forget to sign up for the Hugh-niverse. All of Hugh's broadcasts on demand, the after show, which in my opinion is worth the price all by itself, Dwayne FM, and all sorts of bonus content. www.hugh-niverse.com.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined by Dr. Ward, by Larry Arnn. And Dr. Ward, we're talking about what did George Whitefield do at Oxford, and what was the kind of theology that he adopted that made him enter into the itinerant preacher life?
Well, before he had a break with the Wesleys over what you would call, I guess, Calvinism and predestination and those sorts of doctrines associated with Calvinism. The Holy Club, out of which Whitefield came and was part of with the Wesleys, was in some ways a carryover from Puritanism, and it was an idea of trying to make all of life, every day, every aspect of every day, committed to God. They met for prayer, Bible study, and they also engaged in various kinds of efforts to alleviate poverty and help in prisons and the like. So it was a very activist sort of Protestantism that you could see earlier with Puritans in the 16th and 17th centuries. But then, and that would have meant a kind of Calvinist view of salvation, the idea of God's sovereignty and choosing people, that people are so sinful they cannot choose God on their own, so there needs to be some sort of work of God in their lives. And that was part of the break of eventually among the so-called Methodists. Whitefield became a Calvinistic Methodist, as it were, and the Wesleys went a different direction. But it's in some ways a smaller theological difference as well that may get too much into the weeds of Protestant theology.
Is it fair to say that both believed in the warming experience? Wesley records he had an unusual warming of the heart after, I think he was returning from one of his Georgia trips, and Whitefield's going back and forth. Did they believe in an emotional attachment to their faith?
Yes, if you want to call that the new birth. I mean, the idea of the new birth or the born-again experience, which of course you can see earlier in Christian history, even with the Apostle Paul, say, on the road to Damascus experience. But what we associate with born-again Protestantism and evangelicalism really does begin to emerge during this first Great Awakening through the efforts of the Wesleys, especially in the British Isles, and then Whitefield in North America, although he also went back and forth between Britain and America.
Now, when he moves through America giving these 18,000 sermons, 500 a year, 10 a week, is he making what we would know in popular culture as an altar call?
No, I think that comes more in the 19th century with the so-called Great Awakening of Charles Finney. You could see the fingerprints of it. The sermon that we have in the reader at Hillsdale, The Kingdom of God, it does end. I think he's giving the sermon in a church burial ground, and he's sort of reminding people of their ultimate destiny, that they're going to wind up there in the ground at some point, and they're going to meet their Maker. And that is a way to generate, to call for people to have belief, to remind them of their death and what may be coming, and that could produce an emotional kind of experience. But the actual idea of calling people to come forward and then sit even at an anxious bench, which is what Charles Finney called it, that doesn't happen with Whitefield.
Now,
I want to read you a paragraph, Hugh.
Please.
It illustrates exactly what Daryl just said. It's not at the end of a sermon. It's at about 3 paragraphs down. But listen to this. Do not turn your backs. Do not let the devil hurry you away. Be not afraid of convictions. Do not think worse of the doctrine because preached outside the church walls. Now, they're standing in a field. Our Lord, in the days of his flesh, preached on a mount, in a ship, and a field. And I am persuaded many have felt his gracious presence here. Indeed, we speak what we know. Do not, therefore, reject the kingdom of God against yourselves. So that's the next thing to it. And he really did stir them up.
Now, my question for you, Dr. Arnn, do you think it is a necessary sign of a good health in a university that the population of that university is becoming more attached to religious belief than it is less attached. Because it seems to me most universities are in the business of tearing down religious belief now. Some, including Hillsdale, are quite supportive of it and see it grow.
Yeah, well, that's not a difficult question to answer. If you just look at any old college, I mean, 100 years old or more, ours is 175 years old, in England or America, they're all founded with purposes that encompass both knowledge and faith of God. And that means they're set up with that purpose. And it's, you know, the working out of the Christian faith is the one that's friendly to knowing, the most friendly to knowing. You're invited. Jesus is referred to as the Word, something God has to say, right? So you can hear what he says and you can think about it. And that means that's you know, hallowed in America, and amazingly, almost entirely extinguished today, and that's in recent decades. That's not an old thing.
No, there is in Harvard, the oldest college, Harvard Memorial Church, which was until recent decades a centerpiece of life. It is now a formal place where occasions are held, and the occasional funeral and wedding will be held there, but it is not and they have a daily chapel, and it's poorly attended. I am curious, Dr. Hart, if Whitefield had to dumb down his learning. We think of Oxford grads, present company excluded, of having come forth with a great deal of learning and going into the high church and leading a rather refined and intellectual life. That is not what Whitefield is about. Does he have to dumb down his sermons?
I don't know if he dumbs it down so much as simply the analogy I use is with H.L. Mencken writing about Billy Sunday in the 20th century, and it's a little anachronistic, but he hit people with everyday life. He used imagery from the fields, from the markets, and I think that's probably a smart way to go. So in a sense, it's not the learned sermons that he would have grown up with in the Church of England, which may have engaged in certain kinds of philosophical or moral reasoning as part of what you do in an established church setting. But Whitefield didn't do that, and that was also part of what distinguished him from the regular clergy, both in America and the British Isles, that he could speak in the vernacular, as it were. Protestantism starts by speaking in the vernacular, and Whitefield carries that to another level by using the imagery of everyday life, as well as sort of thinking about how people can live daily for God, as opposed to going to church weekly and letting that be the focus of your devotion.
Now, Dr. Hart, next week we turn to Ben Franklin, who is a critical figure in American history. What does Whitefield do to Franklin, if anything, and what does he do to plow the ground for the revolution?
Well, first of all, Whitefield is a democratic phenomenon, right? Huge throngs of people, anybody can come for free. Each is responsible for his own salvation. And, you know, I should mention in that context that Whitefield was an insufficient enemy of slavery. He actually owned slaves, and he called for the introduction of slavery into Georgia, where it had been banned by James Oglethorpe, because he thought that he could better support his orphanage if he had slaves. He was also a huge spokesman for the good treatment of slaves, but that does mean he differed from the Wesleys,
yes,
who were against it root and branch. And I think what that tells us, by the way, is that this transition that happened, and happened extensively in America, that they came to see, they began by seeing slavery as an ordinary thing, and they ended up seeing it as an evil. And that was largely complete by the time of the American Revolution, although there was a reversal because of the introduction of historicist thought into America. Anyway, the point is, that's worth saying. But it's also true that these preachers, and George Whitefield was the greatest of the preachers, what they're talking about, and see, Whitefield died before the American Revolution.
1770, yeah.
Yeah, and, you know, the tensions had started, but only 7 years before he died. And so he's not a figure in that, but he is a figure for this understanding of the position of the human being responsible himself before God and responsible himself to make a choice to respond.
I was going to venture a theory, and you can tell me if it's not, is that he also is of the gospel that you matter. You tradesmen, you farmers, you yeomen of the earth, you all matter. I'm here to talk to you. And that's a very, as you use, small d democratic thing, and it's new. In Great Britain, not many of those tradesmen actually mattered.
Yeah, not at that time. Changed a lot in the 19th century. But Britain became a representative government of all adults. That was finally completed in 1927, right? Much after we did it. So yeah, but that's and see this I personally hope for a great revival. I'm looking for the next Billy Graham.
When we come back from break, we'll see if the next Billy Graham will pick up something from the first Billy Graham, who would be George Whitefield. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back to conclude this week's Hillsdale Dialogue. Except I do want you to head over to HughHewitt.com and please make a generous contribution to Food for the Poor. We are in the final weekend of my campaign to help the children of Honduras. And there are, well, you heard in the press conference yesterday, a reporter referred to a 9-year-old who had been dispatched by his parents north because of their information that the border was open. Lots of poor parents are desperate, sending their children north. They're desperate because they can't eat. Listen to this update from a television reporter on the ground there.
Children, like other children in this region, are not developing according to their age due to malnutrition, and families in unimaginable misery. Here, infant malnutrition is an epidemic. Poverty here seems like a curse, and diseases among children are rampant.
Rampant. The situation in Honduras, indeed throughout Central America, is very, very grim. But you can add a little light to it. You can do something yourself. For a gift of as little as $37, you can feed a hungry child for 6 full months. 3 kids for $111 for 6 full months. You do the math. Then please go to HughHewitt.com and click on the Give Food, Give Hope banner for Food for the Poor. Or you can phone your best gift at 855-359-4673. That's 855-359-HOPE. Now, some of you got checks from the federal government this week, $1,400 per person. And I know you might need it, but if you can spare 5 or 10% of what came in and go to Food for the Poor, that would be greatly appreciated. And you will save lives. Thank you. Let me also remind you, ReliefFactor.com. Here's the bag before we go back to talking about George Whitefield. Imagine what George Whitefield could have done with ReliefFactor.com. There it is. It's got the North Carolina blue, lime green edge, Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. I took it in the first hour. I remind you, every other hour of every single Hugh Hewitt show. Don't leave home without it. You folks go to work at different times in the day. You listen to me on podcasts different times of the day. You may be watching on YouTube. You may be watching on Facebook. You may be listening to my podcast, The Interview with Hugh Hewitt. Wherever it is, you'll hear Relief Factor, because that's a crusade for me. I want people to stay active. I want people to keep moving, and you can do that today, ReliefFactor.com. $19.95. $19.95 gets you a 3-week starter pack of ReliefFactor.com. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with the Hillsdale Dialogue. More on George Whitefield right here on The Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. Dr. Ward and Larry Arnn are here. Larry is the president of Hillsdale College. Get your application in hillsdale.edu because tens of thousands of people are doing that. Watch the courses online. Join us every week. All of the Hillsdale dialogues are collected at hughforhillsdale.com. George Whitefield is who we are talking about today. From 1714 to 1770 is his lifespan, but his last 20 years plus are spent in the United States preaching often. Dr. Ward, if there was going to be a new great Dr. Hart, if there was going to be a new great awakening in the United States, and it was going to be based on Whitefield's message, what would it sound like?
Oh boy, geez, that's a really hard one. You mean today?
Yeah.
Right as a sermon.
Well, I still think it would sound like Whitefield in many respects. There is this phenomenon called New Calvinism associated with figures like John Piper. Piper, a Baptist minister in Minneapolis, now retired, but was quite prominent and popular, still very popular, associated with organizations like the Gospel Coalition. In some ways, his inspiration came more from Edwards, but Edwards and Whitefield's theology is very similar. And within that world of Protestantism, anyway, it sounds like...
I'm not surprised to hear you bring up Piper, whose book Desiring God is sort of a modern Christian classic, and it does speak to changing every day into Sunday, which I think is part of Whitefield's message in the kingdom of God, isn't it?
Yes, it is. That you live before the face of God every single day, and that you serve God every single day, and you seek to be holy every single day, every minute of every day. It can get pretty intense, and I mean, people do burn out from that. But it still has when it starts in the 18th century, it has great appeal. And just to double back to what we were talking about at the end of the last segment, as far as the connections to the Revolution and American founding, I think people see that you can be religious and devout without an established church, thanks to Whitefield. And however you want to come down on the distinction between church and state and the American founding, I think a lot of people could recognize, and Franklin saw this in Whitefield, that you can be a devout Christian and not have to have the apparatus of a bishop in the American colonies or in the American states organizing religious life for everyone.
And Dr. Arnn, no, I would say the argument against a great revival happening in America ever again is that in the time of Whitefield, the university was in favor of faith, and academia today is opposed to it. And not just in college, but in high school and elementary school, academia is largely hostile to religious belief.
Yeah, but isn't it also true that in step with that, the academic world is losing distinction and prestige?
Yes.
I mean, first of all, what does it mean that we live in a time where Harvard, which is, the greatest American university, and I don't know if it's the best, but it's certainly one of the best, that's almost like a curse word to millions of people. And why? Because it actually is not, the best thought in the world of human beings thinking is what is the human being and what is the good life for it, and how, when you turn to politics, can everyone be afforded that life? Well, and all the great Whitefield, I mean, he's a wonderful man with, his flaws like we have him today too. He's appealing to the best part of every person who comes to hear him. And that's why they're moved so much, right? People love that. And that's an American thing, too. It's widespread here first. So the point is, and the university, that's, John Adams went to Harvard. What did he learn there? He wrote the Constitution of Massachusetts. He was one of the people who made our country. And so in that time, there's nothing but good from the university. And
James Madison goes to Princeton, and Witherspoon teaches him the same thing. And right. Universities used to do that, but I would guess it is rare. I know Hillsdale, I know other places do it, but we've got to have, 90% of institutions of higher learning are at best indifferent to religious belief.
Best, yeah. Yeah, and that's not, And see, remember, the movement, in my opinion, in modern thought, and especially these days, it's amazing how despotic it is that we have to seize power over everything, even the standards themselves. And that's a rebellion against God and a rebellion against nature. And C.S. Lewis, in The Abolition of Man, which everybody ought to read, he just shows how that leads inevitably. The rule of man over nature results necessarily in the rule of some few over everybody else. And that means that Harvard is looked upon by people as an enemy. And in some ways it is.
Well, in many ways it is. In some ways it remains true to its mission, but the mission is complete at Hillsdale. Gentlemen, thank you both. George Whitfield yields to Ben Franklin next week, America, as we continue to go through the American Heritage Reader. I'm holding it up so you can see it. You can get it from Hillsdale College. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. Thank you, America. Thank you, Adam and Ben. Thank you, Harley and Dwayne. I'll be back next Monday on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.